WFJA 105.5, Sanford, Pinehurst, Southern Pines.
It's now time for the Recovery Boys, Lewis Finch and Macon Moy, as they spend the next hour with you discussing the issues of alcoholism and drug addiction, as well as the road to recovery. Here's Lewis and Macon.
Everybody, I'm Macon.
And I'm Lewis.
And we are the Recovery Boys.
Hey, we nailed it.
Yeah,
week.
how about that?
First time in a while.
Only took us 14 shows.
Exactly.
To get close.
Yes, we're slow learners.
We are, to say the least. Well, we'd like to thank everybody for listening tonight. We were gone last week, but we're back, and I don't think we're going to be missing any more. Based on Carolina's play in the ACC, I don't think that they'll have a lot more basketball in front of them this year, but you can't ever tell. But anyway, we're glad to be back tonight. If you want to call us, you can reach us at 866-465-3110. You can listen to us online. If you go to therecoveryboys.com, there's a Listen Live tab. Just hit the button, and you'll be able to pick up the show. And also, if you want to send us a email, not just for tonight or anytime, we check it all week. There's a contact option on the website, and you're welcome to reach out to us and ask us anything you want to ask us. We had dinner earlier tonight, wonderful place.
Yes.
In downtown Sanford. Cooper's, I think was the name of it. And
formerly the Steel Pig.
Yeah, formerly the Steel Pig. It was actually Taylor's hairdresser who turned us on to it. We want to thank her. What's her name, hon?
Denise.
Well, love you, Denise. That was the chicken I had was amazing.
I don't have a hairdresser.
Anything?
Yes, I do. I'm going to put her on the spot. This is unscripted. But can you do you know excuse me, do you know what step 8 is off the top of your head? If you don't, I've got it right here in front of me. But
we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
you are good. Wow.
And Kelly, was that a difficult process for you? I know it's a difficult process for me. I mean, I'm just speaking, from my own experience.
I wouldn't say that it was difficult. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A little bit, going back and looking at all the mistakes I've made and harm I've caused. But, I know it's a necessary process.
I got to ask you, Kayla, how long was your list? How many people are on it?
Oh, Lord.
Can you count
probably
that high?
about 15, 20 maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I feel really bad. Mine was 65 people.
Yeah.
I had 65, and I kept coming up with other names too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm older than you. I just live longer.
Yeah. But okay, it's a process. There's a lot of different ways to get. Listen, a lot of us believe in 12-step fellowships, but there's a lot of different ways to get sober and a lot of different ways to stay sober. The steps are certainly one of the more studied and more used interventions. But listen, I'm just glad that you are experiencing life at a completely different angle. And it's not just you; it's your family and all the people around you. So I'm just happy for you.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
And we can't tell you how much we appreciate the few minutes you spend with us at the start of each one of our shows. And we will call you again next week. All right?
All right. Y'all have a good week.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Isn't it cool, Lewis, talking to people in recovery?
It really is. Yes. I say this often. I don't know how you do it that young. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think that maybe given the communication is so much easier these days, maybe it's a better known in society. Listen, society talks about addiction now. It's not something that we cover up. And so, maybe it's that we are better as a society of educating our young people to the dangers of it. Back when my grandfather, who turned out to be a classic, horrific alcoholic, when he'd go away to detox, or as they said, he went away to the nervous hospital. What they said was that Grandpa just needed to go to the nervous hospital for a little while. It was, the family was embarrassed to own up to alcoholism. It was considered a moral failure. And I think that maybe in 2020 we understand it's a disease, and it's not something to be embarrassed about, but it is something that you have to acknowledge and deal with.
Well, and to me, what is so sad about all this is as much as people are around it and talk about it and it's in the news, and it's still carrying that shame and guilt moniker with it everywhere it goes.
Right.
I mean, when I was working for the treatment center in Georgia, Willingway, who we've had a couple of visitors on from that.
Right.
It was amazing that the people who would come in absolute denial, that they would rather be schizophrenic or have some other mental illness than be an addict or alcoholic.
Yeah, it's really is interesting how the conversations that we have. I mean, I work with people that are hoping for recovery, aiming for recovery. You do it every day as well. It's always fascinating to me the way they want to frame their problem. Mm-hmm. And so many times their ego is still involved. They're still in denial. We talk about the steps. Accepting that you have a problem is that's the first basic thing you got to be able to do. Is you got to admit you have a problem, that you're powerless over whatever your drug of choice is, or alcohol or whatever. So it's amazing that they can't look. I had a conversation with a guy this morning. Look at your action, look at what the consequence, and then try and explain it to me like I'm a 3-year-old, because I can see it, and for some reason you can't. I
was talking to a friend on the drive down tonight, and he was talking to me about a young man that he was counseling, and he was trying to convince the young man he needed to go to treatment, and that he kept denying that he had an alcohol and drug problem, and he pointed out to him and he pointed to the last 4 incidents that involved his parents and the police, all were drug related. Yes, there were behavioral issues behind that, and it looked like things were not right mentally for him, but alcohol and drugs were involved every single time.
Yeah.
So
it's just it's crazy, the conversations, but I have to remind myself when I'm having these conversations, I think back about all the things that I used to say to the people who would look at me funny, and there I was killing myself with vodka and opiates, and people were watching me, and nobody could quite figure out I'm supposedly somewhat of an intelligent person, how I couldn't see it. But you know what? I could see it. I just didn't want to.
Well, and we both know intelligence has zero to do with this.
That's exactly right.
In fact, sometimes it gets in the way.
Right. And one of the other things, there's that mental obsession, the thought of doing something, and all the brain activity that creates. And then if it's sad enough that you actually develop that addiction, and then the tolerance issues come into it, I mean, it's a big dark hole that you can get falling into.
Very much.
Well, Louis, tell us about. Well, first off, how's everything over at Wellwind?
Good, really good.
You busy?
Yes, I don't say that with glee, but we're there to help people, and there are a lot of people that need help. And
one of the other things we talked about tonight, and we'll talk about it a lot more, is your intervention business, Arendelle.
Mm-hmm.
That stays busy as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's kind of, when people call in, we're not really sure which side of the coin they're going to be ready for. So
yeah, when we started this show was to become a resource, and one of the things we'll try and do is help those people that are struggling with somebody, either somebody who wants help or somebody who wants to get some help for somebody. We'll try and make those resources a little bit more visible on our website and also on some of our programming going forward. So that's some of the things that we'll do going forward. But tell us about our guest tonight.
Well, do we have him on the line? Patrick, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Louis.
Great. So I want you to fill in some of the gaps on this thing. I can't remember. I'm getting so old. You and I met last year, right? Or was it
Yeah.
year before last?
No, I think it was last year.
Okay, so we met last year. Patrick is old enough to be my son. In fact, I have children older than him. But he's one of those guys who is knowledgeable beyond his years. He's got a terrific story, and I've been anxious to have him on because I really do think I actually got to see him in action. He was in my car when I got a call, and he kind of helped me with the call, and he's just a font of incredible knowledge and experience, and a lot of it comes from his story. Patrick is a certified addiction and drug counselor at CADC. Is that right, Patrick?
Yeah, they just changed it from the CSAC January 1st, so now it's CADC.
Okay, and he's the owner of Santa Counseling out of Charlotte. So if anybody is listening down there, call Patrick up and utilize the services.
Absolutely. And I lived in Charlotte, so there's plenty of people that need to call him.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll make him start funneling people to you. Don't worry.
That's right.
But what fascinated about me was he's, if you didn't know him, if you hadn't never seen him before, and since this is radio and he's not in the studio, you would never know he is as young as he is. He really is. And I can tell you, I wasn't anywhere close to being as self-aware at his age as he is.
Well, we were just talking about that, how Lewis made the comment, how we had Patrick, you probably didn't get a chance to listen to her, but we have a young lady who's new to recovery. She was a drug addict, and she opens up the show with us as she's new to recovery. She's excited about the way she lives and everything. And Lewis made the comment to her made the comment to me when we hung up with her, is that it's amazing to him how some people can get it at such an early age. I think, with the social media, with the internet, I think that maybe, as I said to Lewis, maybe society is finally starting to realize it's a disease and not a moral shortcoming, and people are not as embarrassed to look for help as they used to be. But it is amazing that at a young age, I have people in my AA home group, that got sober when they were 15, 16, 17 years old. I was just getting started at 15.
I don't even understand that. So, Patrick, just for the sake of clarity, how did we meet?
I think we actually met at the Recovery Awareness Day that the Blanchard Institute put on at Valentine last year.
That's right.
And you were sitting next to me, and I had heard about you, and some of my friends in the Charlotte area and Raleigh area told me that I needed to connect with you. And I think I was probably stalking you on either LinkedIn or Facebook or something and knew what you looked like, and then just struck up a conversation with you when I saw you at RAD. And I think that's
and you've been
the rest is history.
You've been around ever since. I remember that because you've been coming to our networking events on a regular basis. But so you and I kind of discussed a little bit of this earlier today. But could you kind of fill in, give us you're from Charlotte originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of give it. How did you grow up? What bridge did your family live under that made you become a drug addict? Right. So you could kind of take us through that part.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a little backstory. So I grew up here in Charlotte. My dad and his two brothers started a restaurant and wine shop back in 1972 called Arthur's.
Oh yeah.
That is still around. They're this year will be their 48th year in business. And so, growing up in the restaurant business and in a wine shop probably wasn't the best thing for somebody with two sides of long lines of alcoholism in the family. And I was an only child. I spent most of my childhood, at Arthur's, growing up around the restaurant and helping my dad out. And he ran the restaurant portion of the business, and my oldest uncle Robert, he was the wine guru, and the middle brother John, he took care of a lot of the finances and ran one of the stores downtown that used to be in the Wells Fargo building. But I grew up. We always had a lot of teenage and younger, high school kids that worked at Arthur's, and I was exposed to, a lot of their, high school shenanigans when I was young, and I saw weed, and it was a common place for the kids to be drinking, and it was just something that it was like part of our culture. And you know, my family, there wasn't a lot of you know, there was no talk of addiction or alcoholism. I mean, I didn't even know what that was growing up. It was, you know, I mean, there was wine around, but I never saw like my mom or dad knocked down drunk or fighting or screaming at each other or anything like that. No big red flags with regards to my family life and alcoholism or addiction. Everybody kind of handled their own, and you know, everybody was functional and got up, went to work, and did what they needed to do. But you know, everybody kind of liked to, you know, wind down at the end of the day and have a couple glasses of wine or a couple drinks, and it was no big deal. And you know, I mean, looking back on, I know, like in my early recovery, like when I was, you know, going to therapy and treatment and having these one-on-one sessions, when I finally get some help, you know, everybody comes into the treatment process and they're like, oh yeah, my family was perfect, everything was fine growing up, no trauma, no. And then as you kind of grow in recovery and you start to peel back some of those layers of the onion, and if you're lucky enough to have a good therapist that really knows how to break through some of your denial. I mean, everybody's family's messed up. Everybody, you know, has some type of adverse childhood experience, whether it's, you know, trauma related or some type of neglect or you know, some type of abuse, or I mean, it can be anything. There's so many different things that could create, you know, a situation where you would have to have some type of coping mechanism that lied within the realm or spectrum of addiction. So like, you know, now after writing tons of 4 steps and having lots of therapy, and hindsight's always 20/20, I've taken a pretty good look at my past, and you know, behaviorally and emotionally, I can see the disease of addiction present, you know, as far back as I can remember. I'll tell you guys a couple little short stories that display it pretty appropriately. And one of them that I like to tell, I was a basketball junkie growing up. I mean, I was in the driveway from age 5. You know, I'd stay out there all day and shoot baskets and play with the kids in the neighborhood. And it was kind of my first love. And you know, I don't know if it was something that I used as a coping mechanism early on. I think it turned into that later on in my childhood. But you know, it was something that I always loved, and I ended up, I was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and we were living right by South Park Mall in Charlotte, and there was an old drugstore right behind Country Day School called King's Drugs, and they had like boxes of basketball cards behind the counter, and I didn't really at this point, like, you know, I mean, I knew that kids collected baseball cards and stuff, but I think I was in there one day with my dad, and I'd heard some kids talking about basketball cards, and you know, I asked him if he'd buy me a pack of the basketball cards, and I opened the pack, and there was like I think it was a David Robinson rookie card.
Wow.
And
The Admiral.
and I went and the Admiral, and I went and found out that this card was worth a lot more money than what my dad paid for the pack of cards. So, you know, my little addict brain gets to thinking, and you know, I realized, okay, well, you can pay $1 for one of these packs, and there's a chance that you can get a card that's worth $20. And that was my first experience with addictive behavior. You know, I started, I mean, you know, the next day I'm like, okay, well, now we need to buy 2 packs, and I buy 2 packs, and there's no David Robinson, and I'm like, all right, well, I need to buy some more. I need to get another David Robinson, or I need to get a Michael Jordan, and you know, I open the 10th pack, and I finally get a Michael Jordan, and boom, I get that little hit of dopamine, and it's on. And fast forward 8 months and, 8 or 9 months, and I'm like, head to toe my room. I mean, there's basketball cards all over my room. I'm going all over the place trying to buy these things, trade them. And when I was I was probably 10 or 11. And now it's like, totally obsessive compulsive behavior with regards to these basketball cards. A friend, myself and a young friend of mine, we started autographing these basketball cards. And there was a card shop at Cotswold Mall called All Stars, and we used to go in there with a stack of autographed basketball cards that we signed. And this was before the whole authentication thing, and nobody knew what was what. And we would go in there, and I remember we made up some type of story how my buddy's dad worked for the Hornets, and we would get to go in the locker room. I mean, it was insane looking back on it, thinking the stuff that we conjured up to make this thing happen. But we would go in there with a stack of cards on a Saturday morning and tally up what all these autographed cards were worth. And he would say, okay, well, you guys got $300 worth of credit to get whatever you want in my store. And we would sit there all day on Saturday and just rip packs of cards open that we traded for these fake autographed cards. And,
you know what impresses me about that? I hate to break your cadence on
yeah,
it,
no,
but you actually could write in cursive.
yeah.
At that age.
That's that country day education.
Obviously.
So I was actually, and thank God they didn't do it on the autograph piece, but I was on the cover of the Charlotte Observer's business page when I was 11 years old. It was some story on young entrepreneurship, and I'm standing in the middle of this card shop with sifting through cards. I still have the picture in the article. But, there's probably, I feel bad now. There's got to be people in Charlotte that if you have an autographed Michael Jordan card in your safety deposit box and you live in Charlotte, you might want to get it authenticated because there's probably a good chance that I signed it.
That's classic.
That's where kind of the behavior started, and then next thing you know, I'm 12 years old. My parents split up. I'm in middle school. It's like, and I'm just primed. I got addiction in my genes. I'm an only child. I'm spending a lot of time alone. I'm at a very academically competitive school. I was the second youngest person in my class, so I was always smaller than most of the other guys. So a lot of not good enough going through my mind and figuring out different ways to make up for that and fitting in. And basketball was, again, one of my outlets. I was a pretty good athlete and did a good job kind of hiding behind that growing up. But when my parents split, that was like kind of the beginning of my substance use. I started smoking cigarettes to fit in when I think I was like 13. It was 6th or 7th grade, and then next thing you know, we're drinking in the playroom at a friend's house on the weekends, and then we're smoking weed by the end of 8th grade, and the summer, I guess I think it was the summer before my freshman year in high school, my dad had knee surgery, and it was, I don't know, it was during the summer, so we weren't doing anything. And there was a guy that I used to play basketball with that was a little bit older than me. He was a couple years older than me, that was over at our house. And I think it was like mid-afternoon. I think I'd had a couple beers that day, and I was pretty relaxed, and my guard was down. And it probably normally wouldn't have been something that I would have done if I wasn't somewhat intoxicated, but my dad had a bottle of Percocet from his knee surgery that was sitting in the house, and my buddy saw him and was like, "Hey, have you ever taken one of these things?" And I said no, and he threw me a couple, and I popped them in my mouth, and next thing you know, I was in heaven.
Yep.
And I'll never forget it. I was laying on the couch, and I was flipping through the TV channels, and when they kicked in, I dropped the remote on my chest, and there was a guy on QVC selling Beanie Babies, and I sat there in a stoned position for like 3 hours and watched this guy slinging Beanie Babies on QVC, and I didn't want to move my hands to pick the remote up off my chest because I felt so good.
Wait a minute. I think
And-
Macon just high-fived me. He gets that.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's it was like this was in the mid-'90s, before the whole "Throw Your Pills Away" campaign. Before the whole opioid epidemic, before OxyContin, and every medicine cabinet in Charlotte was filled with prescription painkillers.
Yes, they were.
And you know, I was, you know, other than being a thief of time and my family's peace, you know, at that point in my life, I'd never stolen anything from anybody. And, you know, after that day and after that bottle of Percocet was gone, I mean, my mind was off to the races with regards to this stuff. And I had absolutely no idea or awareness of what the consequences of starting this stuff would be.
How old were you at this point?
I was probably 14.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really young. And I think from that day on, I ingested some type of opioid up until the time of my first, you know, treatment episode when I was 26. And, you know, I was taking them all day long. I had them dosed out. And I was like, you know, I want to think I was pretty smart about it. You know, I was never the type of quote unquote addict that used to check out. I hated benzos. I didn't like to drink until I blacked out. I was more into, I want to have like the perfect buzz going on all the time. Mm-hmm. And I, you know, I was very, very sociable. I'm an extroverted kind of guy. I had a lot of friends, had a lot of stuff going on. So I needed to be like out there in the open without it being too obvious that I was losing it on the inside. And I came up with a pretty good system of being able to, you know, I guess you could say attempt at controlling my use at that age, to where, you know, if you're looking at this thing objectively from the outside, I looked like I kind of had it together. For a long time, because when those opioids came into my life, my drinking started to decrease, my marijuana use started to decrease, and I was solely focused on those opioids, and there was such an abundant supply of them in the community that I was in. It was very easy for me to obtain them and use them consistently.
How would you go about getting them back then?
I mean, again, it was like through my social network. I mean, I would, a lot of the times I would just go over to somebody's house that, you know, we were hanging out with, and, you know, hey, can I use the bathroom, or can I, you know, or I'd sneak into the kitchen when everybody else was in the living room, and I'd go look through medicine cabinets, and they were everywhere. I mean, I remember I had a backpack that was just filled with them, and none of my other friends in the beginning were using. So I had like all these things to myself, and I became a little self-made pharmacist. I, you know, had the book that told you what everything was, the pill book, and because this was before you could look stuff up online. And I mean, there were times when I took stuff I had no clue what it was, or there were pills in the wrong bottle, and.
You know, when you can't trust a drug dealer, who can you trust? Right?
Yeah, a pharmacist.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it started. I mean, I was, so my freshman year in high school, again, like I was saying, basketball was my first love, and my freshman year in high school, I got cut from the junior varsity basketball team, and it absolutely crushed me. And I felt at the time that it was a personal vendetta against me from one of the basketball coaches that happened to be one of my PE teachers in middle school that I guess wasn't too fond of my behavior or my attitude back when I was in middle school. And I felt like he was taking it out on me. So that big resentment there. And, but it really emotionally, it destroyed me because that was a major part of my identity at that time. And that was the only way that I felt like I kind of added up to the stature that was required to be at the school that I was at and be amongst the kids and the families that I was around. That was kind of like my claim to fame, and then I felt like it just got ripped out from under me, and that's when, and I didn't know it at the time. It was crazy. It was just those opioids and everything else was there to immediately swoop in and just fill that pain and take away all that anxiety and that depression. And I don't really remember feeling much of it because of the situation that I was in. And again, it was another thing that I was primed and ready to take on. And, there a lot of my high school, I don't recall a day that went by where I wasn't intoxicated at school.
Yeah.
And yet you graduated.
Yeah, barely. I think I graduated with like right at a 2.0. But I ended up bouncing back with basketball. I was the captain my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Again, on paper, from the outside, it looked like everything was okay. Always had a big friend group and did well socially, but academically, not so good, and athletically, I excelled my junior and senior year, but when it came time to decide, about the next step in my education, it to me it literally didn't matter. I didn't have a care in the world about continuing my education. It was never. It was just never a priority for me. My entire life, and I, finagled my way into North Carolina State through some back channels of what they call the continuing education program. I got flat out denied from state, and ended up going up and talk about a horrible idea. I went up there my freshman year, and this is like, through the guidance department at my high school, and they come up with this idea, like, you should just go up there your freshman year and, register for 2 classes, like you're continuing your education as an adult. And then, you take 2 classes your freshman year, 3 classes your sophomore year in the continuing education program, and then you transfer into the university as a transfer student. So I go up to Raleigh with a, alcohol use disorder severe, cannabis use disorder severe, opioid use disorder severe, just full-blown addiction. And I go and I move into the freshman dorm, and I'm going to take 2 classes. So I just have all this free time on my hand to party and get in all kinds of trouble. Joined a fraternity and pledged my freshman year. And I mean, it was just a total nightmare. And I mean, I'm so lucky that, I never killed anybody behind the wheel or ended up falling off a balcony there's so many different dangerous situations that I was in my freshman year in college that could have turned out, it could have turned into a major tragedy that didn't. And so my freshman year, I move into University Towers at NC State, and the kid that's living below me in the dorm is working at Eckerd at Cameron Village, and he comes into my room like 2 weeks into the year and throws a sealed bottle of 40 milligram OxyContins on my bed. And I had never seen these things before. And I'm like, what do you want for me?
Explain what that means for those of
What a 40
Yeah.
milligram OxyContin from like a pharmacological perspective is the same thing as taking 8 5 milligram Percocets at once.
Wow.
So I got 100 of them sitting on my bed. I'm about to run out of all the pills that I brought to Raleigh my freshman year. Because at this point, like, I was taking them every day. I was physically dependent on them. I always had enough of them to where I didn't really get sick. Because I was always taking them, and I didn't know the full effects of what withdrawal looked like from opioids at this point. And then when I started getting a hold of it, this kid, every Sunday he would get off work and he'd bring me a bottle of sealed 40s, and then he got busted about halfway through my freshman year, and by that time my tolerance was just through the roof, and I ran out for the first time and got really, really, really sick, and I had no idea what to do, and I called an old using buddy of mine from back in Charlotte that I used to trade pills with every now and then, and he said, "Oh yeah, dude, you just go to the methadone clinic, man. You can, you can take methadone for a couple weeks until the opiates get out of your system, and then you just stop taking the methadone. You'll be fine." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I don't even know what this stuff is. Don't have no clue what a methadone clinic is. I just wanted to feel better." And I didn't do any research, nothing. So I go over to the methadone. I found this methadone clinic in Raleigh somehow, and I go over there, and they give me this stuff, and I feel better, and it actually got me high. And so I was 19 at the time, and I was on methadone maintenance for 6 years.
Wow.
Wow. I've heard about that. Just didn't know anybody that did it.
Yeah, it was a very dark period of my life. Somebody showed me a picture of me sitting on a couch in a house in Raleigh in like 2004, and I was just obliterated. I mean, you could just see you could see the blackness in my eyes.
The vacant look. Yeah.
So,
And,
was that
this
really the start of your recovery process, in a sense?
That's hard to tell, because being in that situation, I mean, there was nothing about my time. I mean, it probably, I'm still not clear on this. Yes, from a harm reduction standpoint, if you want to say that was the start of my recovery, maybe. I also totaled 4 cars on methadone from nodding off at the wheel, so it was not regulated well. I never passed a drug test at the methadone clinic ever, and there was no adjustment to my treatment plan. And I'm not here to blame anybody, but because of my experience during that time, it definitely was the beginning of my motivation to change the way that we treat addiction, and systematically how much improvement could be possible in our space. Now looking back at it, but I don't know the answer to that question, Lewis.
So but you alluded to you'd been to several treatment opportunities, right?
No, I went to two. I went
Two.
to two inpatient
Okay.
treatment opportunities. So I went. So I started on methadone maintenance, and that just opened my world up to all kinds of different drugs that I was never exposed to. And I don't want to get into that, but it got dark,
Yeah.
very, very dark, and I was not a productive member of society. You know, I mean, I know people that have been on methadone maintenance that have done really, really well, that have integrated themselves back into the world and have stabilized and, you know, have families and do great. And it was a perfect fit for them, but for me it wasn't. I mean, I abused the hell out of it. I manipulated the system, and you know, it led me to where I needed to go. So, you know, yes, I guess the answer to the question is yes. It did start my recovery process, and you know, I landed in I failed out of state and came back to Charlotte, and landed in a 28-day program out in Monroe called First Step, which is no longer there. That was operated by Carolina's healthcare system, and this was in, I don't know, 2008. I was probably 25 or 26. And I finagled my way out of there after 28 days and went back to, I was living with my dad at the time. And, you know, there was no talk of recovery residence. And every, you know, bit of my being the day that I left there would have sworn on my life that I was never going to pick up again. I was done, and I would have bet you anything that was the case, and that I was gung ho about AA, Captain Recovery, you know, and I was high 2 weeks later. I mean, but I mean, I was fully convinced that it was over, and I was high within 2 weeks. And went. Go ahead.
Patrick's making. First off, I wanted to tell you, I'm from Charlotte. Sent 3 of my kids to Country Day. I used to run WRFX. I was the general manager of WRFX to Fox, and had the Jumbo and Billy show. So.
Very familiar.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with all that stuff, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate all the stuff that you've told us. But we've got 15 minutes left, and what I really wanted to hear about from you now is about your career, because Lewis has told me all the great work you're doing, and so your motivation certainly comes from your addiction. But at what point? And I'd love to. I wish we had 3 hours. Every time we have a guest on, it always goes
Absolutely.
so fast. It just goes so
Yes.
quick. But I know your motivation. How did you go from that dark period to your current situation?
So yeah, I'll speed it up real quick. So I ended up going out on another 1.5 year run and landed in a treatment center down in South Florida called Wellness Resource Center. And it's a dual diagnosis facility. I was so torn up at the time that nobody was really sure. I was in a pretty severe psychosis when I went into treatment, and nobody was really sure what was going on. And that was it. I mean, I was just so beat and so tired, and there was nowhere else to go. There was nowhere else to turn. It was just over. And you know, detox was rough. It took about a month for me to finally get some shut eye, and then when I did, there was a lot of prayer, a lot of prayer.
Yeah.
And when I kind of came out of the fog, I knew that, you know, if I didn't get it together, that I wasn't going to last much longer. And I just became a sponge for recovery. Everything about it. You know, I realized very early in my recovery process that the 12-step philosophies and AA and NA and everything that provides wasn't necessarily something that quote unquote is the next right thing to do or something that I'm supposed to do. I quickly realized that it actually made sense. And it was the most efficient way for me to get what I needed and get to a point in my life, where I felt like I had some type of meaning or purpose, or any type of hope.
But at that
makes
point,
any sense.
yeah, but at that point, you really didn't have a clue that you were going to end up being a therapist, though, right?
No idea. So with about 9 months, about a year sober, I worked in the valet department at Boca Resort for about a year, and heavily active in the 12-step community. Heavily active down there, and kind of got recruited by a friend of mine that was working in treatment, and started out in a behavioral health technician position at a local transitional living facility, and kind of worked my way up relatively quickly through the system down there. And I was really lucky to have the supervisors and the mentors that I did, and really lucky to be a part of the good guys that were operating down there, because there were, a lot of riffraff, and everybody, in our space kind of knows the story around South Florida, and the rap that they get for fraudulent and unethical providers. But there's also, a good amount of people that are doing it right and well, and with good intentions and high levels of competency. So I got really lucky to kind of fit in with this crew, and kind of got brought up through the ranks, and got encouraged to go back to school and get my certification as an addiction counselor down there, and then got hired on in a really small outpatient program. Got a ton of supervision. They started me off with like one client at a time. One client on my caseload. I would see a client for one-on-one session, and then immediately go into supervision with my clinical director, and did that for about 6 months, until that finally, started giving me some more clients. And I've just been so fortunate to have had the mentors and supervisors, and really just people that have inspired me to keep going and continue to learn. But I'm a big step guy, but I also had a really influential meditation teacher that was my sponsor for a while, that introduced me to all different types of spiritual practices and philosophies, that really inspired me and motivated me to dig into a lot of different types of literature that were, complemented everything that I was doing with the 12-step groups, but also opened me up to all other different ways of looking at the recovery process. And I'm a big believer in, we got to meet people where they're at. It's we have AA and NA and these 12-step groups, and it's really easy. Or I don't want to say easy. Let me correct myself, but it's easier to recover, obviously, if you want it. And you're willing to go through, whatever you need to do to get the help that you need. But we have a major engagement problem on our hands. The fact that 90% of the people that have a diagnosable substance use disorder never receive any treatment is totally unacceptable to me. And it was clear as day. By the time I was 19, that's when it really kicked in, when I was in college. You started to see my addiction on the outside, and I needed help. But my friends and my family, they had no idea what to do in this space, because I know the angst and the worry and the anxiety and despair that my parents and my family went through during those 15 years of my active addiction, when they didn't know what the hell to do.
Right. Right. Right.
Well, now look at you. You've got a gorgeous wife. By the way, he out-kicked his coverage like crazy. and a little boy, right?
Yeah, I got two.
You have two
Two
little.
little guys. One, I got a 7-year-old, and our youngest is he'll be 3 in June.
Who would figure?
So,
Yeah.
Patrick, how do you get your message out in the Charlotte area? I mean, how do people find out about you?
So I'm working on some projects right now. I work, and God, I wish we had some more time. I'd love to tell you about some of the organizations that I'm working for, that I work with and collaborate with. Real quick, I started counseling down in Florida, and then started my own practice after a few years of working in primary treatment, and got connected with a couple really good organizations that I still stay close to and work with now. One being Voyage Recovery Center. It's down in Hobe Sound, Florida. I was doing mindfulness groups at their place for about a year and a half before I moved back to Charlotte, and they don't do a lot of marketing, but they asked me if I would do some clinical outreach for them when I moved back to Charlotte, because they knew that I would be networking and meeting a lot of people. And it's a program that I don't have to sell. We got 15 room for 15 young men, 18 to 35. We have 5 master's level clinicians for 15 guys. It's a 90-day residential program with a lot of really awesome family work and really cool experiential therapies that the guys engage in. If you want to check it out, you can go to voyagerecovery.com. It's a phenomenal program. And then I also work for Chris Herron's nonprofit, the Herron Project, which is it's a nonprofit that operates out of Falmouth, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, and they provide recovery support services and treatment navigation for families and individuals that lack the resources and finances to pay for treatment. And they do all kinds of really awesome stuff. You can check them out at heronproject.org too.
Yeah,
they have a lot of really cool resources.
Yeah, I've told Lewis at dinner I'd heard. I'll go back in and look at it now, but I know I've heard that story. And I think those are awesome, and we would love to get you back on. And maybe one of the things we're trying to do is off mic, or I'll get Lewis to you give us some of the web addresses, and we'll post them on our website, the Recovery Boys.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
To find.
But yeah, I'm trying to get kind of figure out what's going on here in Charlotte, and figuring out who I need to partner with and collaborate with in order to fill some of these gaps and meet some needs that are missing here in town. And hopefully we're going to do that as fast as we can, because it doesn't look like things are getting any better.
That's the truth.
I think it's great that I think the mental health stigma, they've done a really good job, kind of breaking the stigma down with regards to mental illness, and I think people are finally starting to talk about that a little bit more. And obviously the opioid epidemic has brought some attention to the media, and people are finally starting to talk. So I think we're just now breaking the ice, but I think we'll know everything's good when families are coming out and asking for help at the beginning signs of substance abuse, and having the system and the care in place to be able to serve that need. So
Patrick,
I'm looking forward to it.
I just want to tell you, it has been a joy to get to know you. You are a much younger version of me to some degree. You packed a lot in a very short period of time, and I just want to encourage you to keep doing the work you're doing. And thanks for being my friend. And hopefully,
yeah. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, man, and I'm really looking forward to continuing our friendship and working with each other and figuring out ways how we can help some people.
Yes, sir.
Well, Patrick, the secret is being able to get the message to people that this is where you find information. And it's like you said, I mean, you think about what your family went through. I can't tell you how many times Lewis handles it every day. I certainly get my share of it. My wife's in the business as well. And people calling like they don't know what to do. And you know what? It's just, it's mind-boggling that in this current day and time, people still don't know where to go for help.
No.
It's just unacceptable. It just, it is, listen, it's not complicated, but you do need to know what to do in order to survive this disease.
Well, buddy, thanks for coming on today. It means a great deal.
Hey, thanks for having me. I mean, it's an honor to be asked to do this, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing and getting the word out there.
We're trying.
Yep.
We're trying, and we'll be back in touch with you. And thank you for coming on the show.
All right, thanks again. Good to meet you, Megan.
Nice meeting you, buddy. I look forward to
Take
catching
care.
up with you in person.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, Lewis, he was. I think he could have filled another hour or two. But you know, it's funny. I think that the most influential people, or at least the people in our industry that can make such a difference, are the ones who have suffered through the disease.
Oh, yeah.
You can't learn what we know.
Well, you know, it's much like how much time we got now?
We got about 30 seconds.
All
About
right.
30
Much like Travis that we met earlier, who
Yeah.
ironically they're about the same age. That's what the next generation is going to be like. With folks like that, I think this thing is on a good track.
Well, you know what? Every day gets a little bit better, but we start out in such a hole that we got a long way to go. But hopefully this show is going to make a little bit of a difference. I know that you make a difference every day with what you do, and I certainly try to do the same thing. So we appreciate everybody listening tonight. We'll be back next week with another good guest, and we'll talk more about the disease of alcoholism and addiction. So thanks for joining us tonight on The Recovery Boys.
Good night.
You've been listening to The Recovery Boys on WFJA. Visit the Recovery Boys website.